Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Andy Kamenetsky and special guest Matt Peralta from Lakers Nation. How do Laker fans feel about the state of the team right now and LeBron, AD, and even Rui Hachimura in the Olympics? That's all coming up. Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Lakers your first listen every day, Monday through Friday, wherever you get your podcasts. It's always free. It's never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can hang out with a community of 25,000 subscribers. They are awesome. They are engaged. They are passionate. They are fun. They are funny. They are even respectful, which is not something you find often on the internet. And we use the comments and questions as part of the show all the time. So be sure to leave your thoughts. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Brother Brian remains on vacation. So today we are joined by Matt Peralta. He's part of Lakers Nation, their coverage on the website. He appears regularly on their awesome and very constant YouTube channel. Not going to lie, jealous of their traffic, but it's another story. Matt, it's great to actually meet you for the first time. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no, it's great to meet you too. We were just joking about this off air, but I've been a long time listener. I won't say how long just to spare you, but it's a pleasure to be here, Andy.
Well, I think people can just look at the obvious age difference between us and do the rough math from there. I, as we just acknowledged, have been covering the Lakers for a very long time, and I feel like I've got a good pulse of Laker fans. But you guys at Lakers Nation hear from fans at an even greater volume than we do. Before we even get into everything else on the agenda for this show, what's been your sense and feedback from how Laker fans are feeling about this offseason?
Yeah, I think it's probably similar to yours. It seems there's a lot of, frustration and I think acceptance at this point that the team is probably going to be what it looks like now heading into training camp. I think heading into the offseason, there was a lot of hope, just as far as wanting to upgrade this roster. I remember when D'Angelo Russell opted into his player option, I think the immediate reaction was like, oh, we've got some trades. We're going to make a blockbuster move. We're going to improve this team. And none of that happened. We're still stuck at 15 roster spots with guaranteed guys with player options, which is a topic for another conversation. Well, just another topic for another day, probably. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of in the camp where I've just talked myself into this roster at this point because I just feel like nothing's going to happen. But I think generally speaking, it just feels like, and I don't know if you agree with this, but every time even a minor move gets announced at this point, the immediate reaction from fans online is, oh, look, another player that the Lakers could have signed, or we could have at least gotten into the mix of this if we had open roster spots, or, hey, this guy signed for X amount of dollars. Why couldn't the Lakers do this? And so that's just generally my feel from the community right now as far as the Lakers offseason.
Yeah, it's interesting. And this is something we've talked about a lot on the show. Like, on one hand, I understand the fan frustration of feeling like it's static and feeling like there are upgrades that are necessary. And it's felt like almost the entire league has done something and the Lakers are basically standing pat. I mean, I think you can, and we have debated before, how many of the guys who ended up going somewhere else were realistic for the Lakers, were actually good options for the Lakers, but nobody ever enjoys watching their team stand pat after going out in the first round of the playoffs last season. There is an interesting, though, school of thought, and I've heard it discussed by you guys before, that the Lakers, they're clearly not there yet in terms of being, a front-running contender.
Yep.
But they aren't necessarily that far off, or maybe they just need to avoid Denver. And there's
Sure.
two NBA players that recently gave this some validity. First, former Laker, now former Nugget, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope.
Mm-hmm.
Now with the Magic, was on Draymond Green's podcast and said, quote, "You know how towards the playoffs guys get their rest, but I felt like that's where we spent most of our energy in trying to get that first place and playing catch up. And then we get to the playoffs, we have no gas. We felt like the Lakers should have beaten us. We were down every game, at least 10. I think the highest may have been like 20 something, just taking that energy and using it there. So that was a lot of what went into that season. So KCP acknowledging that it felt like the Lakers could have, maybe even should have beaten them. And then Austin Rivers recently weighed in on Twitter, quote, "When you watch USA basketball and realize the two most dynamic players thus far are two Laker players, you realize they're not far behind in competing for a chip. The window can't be closed considering I'm watching them be the best on the best team in the world." Thoughts? I want to save the specific part about Team USA and LeBron and AD for a little bit later. Mm-hmm. But what do you feel about that school of thought that the Lakers may not be quite as far off as whether the detractors or those who just are frustrated by not getting over the hump may feel like?
Yeah, no, I think it was telling that their peers are saying this about the Lakers. And, if you want to revisit that Denver series, like, yes, the result was a 4-1 series loss, but every game was a lot closer than the year prior. And I think, there are definitely a few different schools of thoughts here. Like, one, if the Lakers had better coaching, you could make an argument that they probably pull out of that series. Two, if they had made maybe a marginal upgrade at the trade deadline, they get out of that series. So I do think that there is some validity to that train of thought. I just think that, and I was just going over this with a friend the other day, is I think if you kind of break out the Western Conference in tiers, I think there's a clear top four. I think you're talking about Minnesota, Oklahoma City, Dallas, Denver. And then after that, it's a pretty wide range of mix of teams. And I feel like you can make an argument for just about any of them. And I feel the Lakers fall right in there. So I do think that the Lakers make maybe a move or two, either this offseason, God willing, or probably at the trade deadline, which looks more likely at this point. But I think, though, the other thing to consider is that we did get a really healthy season out of LeBron and AD. So that's kind of the rub with this thought. But assuming that happens again, I do think that the Lakers can compete with just about any team in the Western Conference. They've clearly got the best duo, I still think, in the league. And once you have that as your foundation, the road to the top is not that bad.
What I think is so tricky for the Lakers is, in a lot of ways, their regular season and their playoffs. Like, obviously, it's two separate seasons. Like, Laker fans know that more than maybe any other fan base. But I think it's more literal in this sense because of the considerations that go into maintaining LeBron for an entire year. And even by the standard of, looking to get your superstars help and not wanting to overexert them too much because contending teams are always thinking about the postseason, you're really looking to try to take that load off LeBron, I think, ideally in a pretty unusual way for a guy like a superstar that's going to be playing 30-something minutes a game. And then, so that requires production from players like a D'Angelo Russell, who once you get into the postseason, he becomes, we've seen at times, problematic and a bad matchup, or his shortcomings become really pronounced. But you can't get to where you need to in the regular season to try to put yourself in the best place for the playoffs without that same production. Like, D'Lo may not be ideal for the playoffs, but he's actually pretty essential for, if not him, somebody else, that production. It's pretty essential for the regular season. So I think it makes a very tricky situation for Rob Pelinka to try to figure out, not letting him off the hook for whatever he hasn't done or the moves that have put the Lakers in this situation, but this is nonetheless the situation.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that the Lakers do find themselves in a tough situation where they need to tiptoe the regular season and the playoffs. Because the way I've always looked at the Lakers since LeBron's come is this is a 16 game team. I just don't think it's realistic to expect LeBron to carry the same workload in the regular season, especially now. He's going to be turning 40 this upcoming season, so there's just no way. I thought that's why it was encouraging to hear JJ Redick, want to move the focal point of the offense and even the defense to Anthony Davis. He's the younger star. It makes a ton of sense to do that. Try to save LeBron as much as you possibly can, but this is the part where it's you are leaning on guys like D'Lo. Austin Reeves is another name that I know is going to have to carry a lot more offensive load and responsibility this upcoming season. So you have those two guys that you can hopefully float you through the regular season, and then you get to the playoffs. And that's the part where I think standing pat is rubbing fans the wrong way right now, is that they just need more guys that you can trust in the postseason. I think
in a perfect world, you have an awesome regular season up to the point of the deadline, and you give yourself enough of a cushion
buffer
to where you maybe can trade somebody like D'Angelo Russell for a player who's much more about postseason matchups as opposed to counting numbers. And you really turn it into a 2-season thing. And I think that's the needle they're looking to thread. And if they can do it, it would be awesome. I just think it's going to be difficult to do.
I know, I totally agree with you. And I don't want to turn this into like a we got to trade D'Lo at all cost conversation, or, it's nothing personal with D'Lo. Like, I've loved having him.
I don't think they need to trade D'Lo at all costs because, again, this thing we're talking about.
Absolutely. It's just a matter of like, how many guys do you trust in the playoffs? And I guess I'll pose this question to you if you don't mind. It's LeBron, it's Anthony Davis, it's Austin Reeves, it's, probably Rui Hachimura and Jared Vanderbilt if he's healthy. And then after that, I guess you can make some arguments for some other guys, but I think those are probably the 5 guys you need. And I've always been under the belief that if you've got at least 7, probably ideally 8 guys, you can get through a postseason. But right now, I just feel like they're missing a couple of those.
All right, coming up, I will give my thoughts about how many other guys could potentially be trusted in the playoffs. And also I want to look a little bit at LeBron and AD and Rui, actually, in the Olympics preseason, we'll call it, exhibition, whatever it is. Talk about that coming up next. Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Game Time. When I was around 12 years old, the Police were on the Synchronicity Tour, probably the hottest ticket in the world. And I could not get seats initially, but I was like, you know what? I'm not going to put any extra effort into this because guess what? I'll just catch the next Police tour. Well, they broke up after Synchronicity, never toured again. And I learned from that experience when it comes to a concert that I want to see, Carpe Diem, don't miss out. And it's why I love Game Time. It's a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the music, sports, comedy shows, and theater near you. And with killer deals on last-minute tickets and the best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets, start getting hyped for the fun. They got flash deals where you save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. And the Game Time guarantee means you will always get the best price. And if you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time credits you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. So snag the tickets without the stress using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day, but you got the volume turned down because of all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 streaming app programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so that question, Matt, that you posed about who I would trust on this roster in the playoffs, obviously LeBron and AD, and I think Reeves's overall track record puts him in there. Rui had a brutal first round against Denver, but he played really well the season before, and he actually, it's hard to remember that the Wizards have ever gone to the playoffs, but they did once with Rui. And he was really good in those playoffs too. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. And honestly, they play any other team in the first round other than Denver just because that matchup against Michael Porter Jr. is about as bad as it gets for Rui. Maybe Rui looks good in the 2024 playoffs as well. I also think if everybody else performs up to standards, I think Vanderbilt, his limitations are not nearly as pronounced. I just talked about this actually with Aaron Larsoul. I feel like Vando wasn't so much played off the floor against Denver in 2023 as the other guys not making shots made Vando untenable. And to me, there's a really big difference. I think if the other guys are making shots, you can live with what you don't get offensively or in gravity from Vando. I'm very curious to see. I mean, Gabe Vincent has a small, but most recently pretty good playoff track record, but it is a very limited sample size. But he profiles as the type of player that you want in the playoffs. I think the big wild card is, does Max Christie develop the way they want to? Because if he develops the way they're banking on him, he's another guy that fits the profile exactly of what you're looking for in the postseason. And then maybe a different matchup other than Denver if D'Lo's still on this team. Maybe, but either way, you got 7 there, I believe, if I did my math right. 7.
You did do the math correctly, and I'm glad you brought up Max because I think he's just largely unproven. We didn't get a chance to see him in the past 2 playoff series, so it's hard to tell. Obviously, I'm still pretty high on him. I was happy with the contract that we give him. Yeah, so I still think there's a lot of untapped upside there with Max. I just think it's a matter of having to see it, which is why I'm a little skeptical, but if he proves me wrong, by all means, I would love that. And then the Gay point, I also considered him. It's just a matter of can he stay healthy? Because I think there's a little bit of PTSD with guards from Miami with Lakers fans right now. And so I'm a little bit in that camp, but I'm not going to hold that against him. I think it was just a weird injury-riddled season for him. So I'm willing to bypass that and give him another shot if they don't end up trading him at some point. So, yeah, I mean, look, that's why I think they're not too far off. You flip D'Lo and some other salaries for another impact guy. I think you're cooking. You're right there.
And that too is where somebody like, say, Dorian Finney-Smith, who I've heard Laker fans talk about a lot. Over the course of 82 games, if you swapped out D'Lo for Dorian Finney-Smith, I think the Lakers come out worse for that. I actually think they're going to struggle more to win games. If, say, they had made that move at last year's trade deadline, frankly, I don't think the Lakers make the playoffs. I don't think they make the playoffs last year without D'Angelo Russell, even acknowledging whatever circumstances, injuries, Darvin Ham decisions, whatever, that put the Lakers in a position where they had to sprint just to make the play, and whatever. That was the situation. They don't do it without D'Lo. But once you get into the playoffs, somebody like Dorian Finney-Smith, where matchups become so specific, he might be more useful in the playoffs or have fewer shortcomings that become exposed than D'Angelo Russell's shortcomings. So again, it becomes this tricky thing. And also, I think a lot of what Pelinka needs to do becomes either idealized or held back based on what the Lakers do in the regular season, because the West is going to be so competitive.
No, I completely agree with that point. And I mean, Dorian Finney-Smith, like you brought up, really popular name. I think he's a pretty gettable player for the Lakers if they decide to go that route. And yeah, like you said, I think when you look at the Lakers from a playoff perspective, I don't really need high usage ball handlers. LeBron's going to be doing that. I just need guys that can fit around him, that can play a specific role. And I think it's really a matter of, I think with D'Lo, the ceiling's a lot higher with him. I don't think there's a question about that, but his floor is just so bad that he can cost you games in the playoffs. And I think with Dorian Finney-Smith, not the more talented player, can't do as many things, but he doesn't hurt you as bad. And sometimes, in the postseason, just having guys that don't actively hurt your team is the difference between wins and losses. And, for the Lakers, I think they kind of need more of those guys right now.
Yeah. Talked about, you just mentioned LeBron and, the way that he'll have the ball a lot in his hands, particularly in the playoffs. JJ Redick's talked about wanting to make Anthony Davis more of a hub.
Yeah.
What are you picturing as far as AD in more of that type of role?
I mean, I think he can do it. I think, one of the underrated parts about AD's game that I think maybe didn't go as recognized this past season was his passing. I thought that he got way better with reads. I thought, for a while, the narrative was teams will send double teams. He'll be a step too slow. Ball will get out late. And then, suddenly the Lakers are scrambling. I thought he did a lot better job of getting rid of the ball early, letting it come back to him, making plays that way. So I do see the vision for it. I think, with better spacing, better offensive principles, hopefully a better roster, I think you'll see more of AD's playmaking come to light. I mean, this is a guy that grew up playing guard, so he's got a natural feel for it. I just think, it's a matter of giving him those opportunities. So yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about it. I am excited to see what exactly that looks like, but I don't think it's far-fetched to say this could be a career year for Anthony Davis as far as a playmaking, and if you want to go raw numbers, assist standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, he's I don't think he's ever going to be like a playmaking hub at the from that position at the level of like
a Jokic, Draymond.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
he's not
like that. Yeah, like no one. I'm just saying, like, no one's going to be that. But I think like people heard hub and they were like, oh, like they're going to use him like that. Like, no,
slow down, everyone. That's not going to happen. Or like, I don't even necessarily know if he can be at the level of like Embiid at his best, or even like Bam at his best. But I do think, like you said, he reads the floor well. I don't know if he's somebody that I would picture as like a playmaker off the dribble, like creating the plays from the beginning. But he's somebody that I think if you set him up at the elbow or in the middle of the floor, or even high screens, and just allow him opportunities through other guys moving and other guys setting things up, I think he'll make the right decisions.
No, I definitely agree with all of that. Yeah, like I'm not expecting him to be like a 6'11", 7-foot point guard, passing guys open and doing all of that. I just think it's a matter of getting in touches in more advantageous spots, drawing defense and help, and then, kicking the ball out. Like, it might not necessarily always result in direct assists, but I think just making the right read and the right pass will get him there. So that's why I said I'm optimistic, because I think he can absolutely do that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great, because I think last year was arguably his best season as a Laker. I think it was one of his best seasons, period. And he's also, we'll get into this next, part of Team USA and absolutely crushing it. I want to talk with you a little bit, Matt, about what to read into that and what not to read into that when it comes to AD, when it comes to LeBron, and also when it comes to Rui, who's playing for Japan. So we'll get into that coming up next. Hey, just a heads up, if you are enjoying Locked On Lakers, it probably means you are a fan of Los Angeles sports. So be sure to check out the Locked On Sports Los Angeles YouTube channel. Everything you want to know about every team in town. The Rams open camp this week, so stay up to date on the biggest stories with Locked On Rams, hosted by Travis Rogers and Doug McCain. We mentioned before, Matt, that Austin Rivers had talked about seeing LeBron and AD. These guys are the two best players for Team USA. You watch that and you think, how the Lakers can't be that far off. How much do you read into what they do? Either both of them? Is it a separate question for AD versus LeBron in terms of what translates for the Lakers next year? How apples to apples do you think it is?
I mean, I think the caveat being, so I'll just say, like, I don't think it's exactly apples to apples. I do think that, one, they're playing with just literally all level talent. So, of course, I think everyone's going to look better. And I think them particularly are going to look better just because they've got better spacing around them. They've got more playmaking. They've got better defense around them. So I think just overall it's enhancing their strengths on the floor. Yeah. But I do think, though, that it goes to show you, like, this team is, and I think I said this after the South Sudan game. I know it was really close, and Team USA probably should have lost that game. But I did want to, shout out to
Wenyen Gabriel.
Shout out to Wenyen Gabriel and Carlick Jones. I forget me if that's his name, but
he. And by the way, shout out to Luol Deng. I know Laker fans hate to hear his name, but that whole program is basically up and running because of Luol Deng, and it sucks the way his Lakers stint turned him into a punchline, but he had a really, really good career, and he's always been known as a just solid character guy. So I think it's awesome the way he's doing this for South Sudan.
Yeah, no, that program is going to be a problem in a few years, I feel like, especially the way that the trajectory looks right now. But just pivoting back to Team USA and LeBron and AD, I just think that my first thought was these are two stars you still invest in if you're the front office. That was my main takeaway, and I still stand by it. It's just because, look, you put them in high leverage stakes games, they can perform. They clearly have the chemistry is still at an all-time high. These guys cover for each other. They do things on the floor. They make plays on both ends of the floor, not even just Anthony Davis, LeBron James too. So I think you give these guys a real shot to compete. Anything can happen. I think parity has been a really popular word in the NBA for the past year now. And I guess, like, you kind of find yourself thinking sometimes, like, why not the Lakers? Like, they don't have to be, they don't have to have a Drew Holiday. They don't have to have a Bam Adebayo. They don't have to have a Joel Embiid, Steph Curry, but give guys that can play roles that are complementary to your two stars. And I think you can really find something worth investing in if you're the Lakers.
It's so crazy, and I get why Steve Kerr is doing it, or whether I get it or not, it's easy to understand how it's happening. But that LeBron and AD, who are so good together, basically do not play at all together with Team USA. It's kind of crazy.
It is. And obviously there's probably a lot more behind the scenes that we're not privy to. I think the popular opinion or the word around the street is Embiid was promised that starting role, which is why you're seeing him start over AD. And let me just say for the record too, he had a really good game the last game against Germany, and so this is going to be turned into Joel Embiid slander. But I just think like AD has been by far and away the best big on Team USA. He makes an impact no matter how many minutes you give him. He's always doing something, and I think that you're seeing an idealized version of AD because he doesn't have to carry the team for 35 minutes. He can come in, plays 15.
You've seen an idealized version of LeBron too.
Same, yeah, exactly. Like these guys do when they do not have to carry the load the way they do for the Lakers. They are outstanding, and they're probably going to be the reason why Team USA gets far into the tournament and hopefully brings back the gold. So, yeah, Steve Kerr's coaching. I can understand now a little bit why Warriors fans get so frustrated with Steve Kerr and his coaching decisions over the regular season. I understand. I sympathize now, but like you said, I understand why he's doing it. But I just think, when the game starts to matter, as soon as this weekend of pool play, like these two guys have to share the floor together.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder if they eventually will start playing together more, regardless of whether or not AD moves in the starting lineup or not, just because you have that weapon of chemistry and familiarity between them. Mm-hmm. And they've been arguably the two best players for Team USA individually. You would think that if you combine that as a tandem, it's going to be even more difficult for whoever they play to stop. There's a part of me that is so sincerely impressed by what both AD and LeBron are doing. I really, truly mean it. There's also a part of me that, as a Laker fan first, a fan of either one of them individually second, and if I'm being totally honest, very indifferent to the Olympics. The Laker fan in me wants them to both get the hell off the court. I appreciate and respect the level of play. I don't want to see either one of them out there, if I'm really being honest.
I mean, the hope is Team USA just steamrolls over everyone. They don't have to play heavy minutes, and we can just,
they don't even play. They don't even play heavy minutes. They play like 20 minutes tops.
And I'm saying to you right now, if they can make that even less, that'd be fantastic.
Yes, it would be.
But yeah, I would love a sweat-free gold. Like, that's cool for them. It's another legacy booster for both of them. I think it'd be cool for LeBron to ride out in the sunset and end Team USA with another gold medal under his belt. I think that'd be cool. And yeah, but to your point, like as a Lakers fan, you're really just praying. And like this has happened a few times with Anthony Davis specifically, where he's gone up for a rebound, he's fallen, gotten fouled, and I'm like, is he okay? Is he okay? Like, get up. Yeah, so like you want to avoid that in this part of the offseason for sure.
That's just the AD experience. I mean, the man falls down so much. It is nerve-wracking. In the meantime, though, I think it's gone under the radar with Team USA and stuff, just because that's where the focus always is, particularly for American-centric audiences. But Rui is playing for Japan, and he's playing really well. Mm-hmm. And with the obvious, again, acknowledged caveats of you get concerned about whatever injury, and also, his role with Japan is not going to be his role with the Lakers. I'm actually more optimistic, and I think more happy to see him playing with Japan, because last year Rui had a terrible training camp. I mean, I had been really, really excited to see what he looked like, because he was coming off a really good playoffs, and he spent that offseason training with LeBron and I think Phil Handy, and he was really bad in the preseason, and it was rough. I think it got forgotten because he got hurt early so often. There was waves arms around so much other crap happening. Yeah. But my hope is that playing for Japan puts Rui in more of a rhythm heading into the preseason, just keeps him really feeling good on the court, because I think him getting off to that slow start also played a role in Taurean Prince ending up in that starting five, which, as we all know, the butterfly effect from that. So I think it's actually pretty important for Rui.
No, I 100% agree with you. I think he didn't play most of the exhibition games. I think he only played against Australia and Germany, but I think it was like 19 and 29 points respectively in each of those games on efficient shooting, by the way, which is I think is really important. So yeah, to your point, I think this is good for Rui too. I'm a very firm believer at this point that the Olympic bump or the Olympic boost is real for NBA guys instead of, just training and practicing with like on 3-on-3 or 5-on-5 situations. You're actually getting like live competition. So you come into training camp already in shape. You've already got into a rhythm as far as like all the basketball on court stuff. And I think for Rui, this is going to be a really huge year for him. I think he's probably going to end up being the 5th starter. And I think that if this shooting efficiency can hold up even relatively close to it, I think the Lakers have got to steal Rui as one of their starters for this year.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see the argument for Rui. If D'Lo starts the season on this team, I think you can make a really strong argument that it needs to be Vando.
Sure,
just to give them more defensive optionality. Like we really saw how less tenable Reeves and D'Lo as a backcourt with their own defensive deficiencies becomes. But I mean, Rui is tempting to put out there. There's no question. I would lean a little bit more towards giving them some more help defensively than strengthening what they already have offensively. But in a perfect world, Rui makes it a difficult decision for Redick. Before we go, last question. What comes next? If you had to identify, Matt, either one player that you think could / should / is on the Lakers' radar that you would like to see them get, whether through trade or free agency, or the position that they should be targeting, focusing on, whatever, what would you choose?
This is a fun question, only because I feel like I might be just talking into the void at this point because nothing's happened yet. So I think that
speak it to existence, Matt, like LeVar Ball. We're speaking.
We gotta speak it into existence. We gotta be. Exactly. We're gonna manifest this. Okay. Okay. I think for the first part, if we're talking about players, you brought up Dorian Finney-Smith. I think I would counter with his teammate Cam Johnson.
Interesting.
Only because if we're talking about JJ Redick, I think we're gonna know a lot about his philosophy as far as like, and it's funny too, as you were talking about, starting Vando over Rui potentially. I was like, I think this will say a lot about what JJ Redick's trying to prioritize on the floor. Yeah. So I think adding another wing shooter, another taller shooter would be really cool. But I think the easy answer and the low hanging fruit is just another big man. Because right now, I think if it's going to be Jackson Hayes and Christian Wood again, I think you'll be pigeonholed into playing AD at the 5. And, going back to this Team USA conversation, he's looked like another worldly defender next to Bam Adebayo who can hold his own. So I'm not saying you need to go get Bam for AD to look like that. I'm just saying get him another big body. Yeah, they can't. I'm letting people know, like, trust me, I know the salary cap. I know what's realistic. I promise I'm not in fantasy land or second apron world like Rob is. But
do it, Rob.
Yeah, just make the trades for all the superstars, Rob. What are you doing? But my point being is that AD has historically looked defensively better next to another 5-man or a true big. So I think if they can't get another shooter with length and size, I think you target that position. Because again, Christian Wood and Jackson Hayes, while I have nothing against those two, I just don't think they're going to cut it, especially in the playoffs. So
he is Matt Peralta. He is part of Lakers Nation. You can see his work, the work they all do over at the site. You can watch them over on the YouTube channel. I can tell by looking at the numbers you are. Matt, this was awesome, man. I'm happy to have you on. I hope you'll be back again.
Oh, Andy, my DMs are open. Feel free to hit me up whenever. It's summertime for all of us, so content can be a little slow. So I totally understand needing to call the C Team Lakers Nation member in. So I'm always available.
Appreciate it, man. Jovan Buha from The Athletic is going to be joining us for Friday. Appreciate everybody being here, and we will see you then.